All right, I just want to test out a theory here. You see the title in the sermon, Everything I Need to Know, ... Let me just hear from our preschool teachers, what is the rest of the title? I learned in kindergarten, right? And if you're really on the ball, you will know that I didn't get the title right. Because it's not everything I need to know, it's all that I really need to know. I learned in kindergarten. And it's a book written by Robert Fulghum. How old is this book? How long has this thing been around? Kind of want to know. It's been around for a while. Oh my goodness. First print was in 1986. It's been a little while. But it's still a good book, right? Anybody have this on their shelves? Pick it up, read it now and then, find some good things inside of it. Yeah. There's some good things inside of it. All that I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. Written by Robert Fulghum, but there may be some things about Robert Fulghum that you don't know. Robert Fulghum, when he was growing up, he was a bit of a smart aleck by his own admission. When he was in college, he used to go to lectures, and at the end of the lecture, if the professor asked, does anybody have any final questions? He would raise his hand and say, I do. What is the meaning of life? And everybody would just kind of laugh and pack up their stuff and go away. It kind of became his shtick. Everybody kind of expected it. And one day he attended a lecture given by a guy named Callistus Ware, Bishop Callistus Ware. And Callistus is known in America as Timothy because it's hard to remember Callistus. And he is a bishop of the Greek Orthodox Church, and he oversees the Greek Orthodox Church in America. And Fulghum went to a lecture put on by this guy and found himself just moved, inspired even. So moved and inspired that he considered not asking his question because he didn't want to distract from the whole thing that everybody was enjoying. But being a smart aleck, he raised his hand anyway. Anybody have any final questions? And he raised his hand and he asked, what is the meaning of life? And everybody who knew it was coming just kind of giggled and packed up, but not Bishop Callistus Ware. He reached into his pocket, dug out his wallet, and he fished around inside there for a little while until he pulled out a broken piece of glass. Looked like it might have been from a lens from somebody's glasses. And at this point, the people in the auditorium were a little bit curious and they sat back down. And he started to tell them a story. He told them how he found this when he was a little boy. And he'd carried it with him for all these years. It was a curious thing to him, and he didn't quite know what it was or what it would do, but being slightly devious as a child, he quickly figured out that you could use this to burn holes in leaves and, maybe torture a couple of ants and a caterpillar here and there. And he kept it, and he didn't know why. And then when he'd get bored in school, having a W for a last name, he almost always got sat in the back by the window, right? And when the sun would come through, he'd start playing a game with it. And he'd try to distract people in his classroom, and he'd shine the light from it onto the blackboard behind the teacher, or he'd shine it right on the teacher's shirt and try to make people laugh. And then as he got older, he started playing a game with it, he said, where he would try to find that most remote spot in the classroom that he could find, or even through the door and into the hallway, and angle that lens just perfectly to shine that light out into that remote area. Then he always just put it back in his wallet, back in his pocket, and carried it, and he didn't know why. When he started to feel his call to ministry, and he started to think about the things that he had learned in scriptures as a child, and started thinking about the things that he was learning from his classes in seminary, and he still had this funny piece of glass in his back pocket, he said that he had discovered the meaning of life. that the meaning of life is to reflect the light and love of God into the darkest places in the world and in the human soul. And then he put his glass away. And just as you are, the audience sat and thought about that before they applauded, which you don't need to do. If you're going to get to a spot that can reflect the light and the love of God into the darkest places, the most difficult places of the human soul, you have to be willing to do two things. First, you have to stay within the light of God. In order to reflect it, and you have to get close enough to that dark place where you reach it. It had been 30 years before she could open up and tell anybody about what happened. 30 years. And when she started to talk, finally, the words just kept coming and coming and spilling out of her with steely determination. She recounted the details with little more than a slightly elevated tempo or tone to tip off how she was feeling. But that was really part of the problem. She became so skilled at burying emotion, burying all of her emotion, that she didn't know how to express herself except with frustration. Happy things for her weren't really happy, and sad things were met with feigned apathy. As she talked about what happened to her, it sounded really more like she was reading a story than telling her own story. She kind of needed that distance to feel safe, and where some people would think that after 30 years and you're starting to talk, that sounds like a breakthrough, right? But for her, it was just too much, and it was too fast to control. And she started digging her nails into her arm at night. When facing simple tasks, she would freeze in place. She drank too much on purpose, sitting behind her family on the couch while they watched TV, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would take her to the hospital so that she could find help. It would take a lot of time and patience for her therapist to walk with her into her emotions, to help her find words that get to the nuances of those three primary emotions of mad, sad, and glad, and even longer until she felt safe enough to cry and then finally believe that it wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault. And then even longer to let herself believe that God actually does love her. It takes a certain measure of wisdom, doesn't it? To walk with someone who had been a victim of what James might call bitter envy and selfish ambition. To be a victim of those who want what they want when they want it and don't care a thing about the well-being of the person they're trying to get it from. It takes a lot of wisdom, born in gentleness, as you read from James, to get close to that dark place. And it takes a lot of courage for those who have those memories to return there and to allow God to touch them. What happened to her is probably at the worst end of the scale of what was clearly a criminal set of experiences for her. But there are hundreds of degrees of behavior lesser than this that are also driven by bitter envy and selfish ambition that bring disorder and bring conflict. You know, like when people want to know where they rank, where they are in the order of things, like who's the best at this and who's the worst at it, and am I okay compared to this person or the other person. And of course, nobody here does that, right? Nobody here seeks to compare themselves with others or finds themselves in systems that intentionally compare self with others, right? The disciples got caught in this level of dispute right after Jesus tells them what's coming. He's trying to teach them on the road. Now, what do you think the job of a disciple is to do when the teacher is talking? Listen. So the teacher is talking. They're supposed to be listening and learning. He says something to them that doesn't make any sense. And so if the teacher says something that doesn't make any sense, what is the disciple's job to do then? Ask a question. And Jesus says the Son of Man is going to be given over and betrayed and killed, and 3 days later he is going to rise again. And they don't get it. But instead of asking a question, they decide to enter into a debate. Which of us is the greatest disciple? Which is ironic because none of them were being good disciples in that very moment. They let their bitter envy and their selfish ambition try to find a ranking for who was the greatest among them. And Jesus isn't stupid. Jesus catches on. And so he decides to correct them, and he tells them, if you want to be first, you have got to be last. You've got to be the last of all. You have got to be the servant of all. And to carry this point home to them, he gathers up to him the most powerless that exists in their society, a child. Is there anyone more vulnerable, more powerless than a child? Now, you parents of children, you preschools of young children, you know that they will try to step forth in their own power, right? You know that they will look at you and you'll say, please, and they just sit there and they go, no. So they're trying to exert their power. They can't defend themselves. They can't really express what they need all the time. And Jesus takes this most powerless one as an example and says, if you want to be the first, you've got to be the servant of all, including the powerless, the defenseless, the vulnerable. You know, we have an excellent preschool. We have an excellent preschool because the first thought in the minds of our administrators, our staff, our faculty is the children. It's how to take care of the kids, how to relate to them, how to talk to them, how to create safe space for them, how to meet their creative needs, how to help them understand where the boundaries lie so they don't continually cross them. We teach them how to sit in a chair and eat off of a little piece of paper towel and not take everybody else's food or throw it around or try to feed the fish in the middle of the table. We teach them how to stand in a line and how to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. Thank God that you teach them how to wash their hands. You teach them how to respect one another. You teach them how to love their neighbor and to honor their neighbor. You teach them how to respect the differences that we have in each other. You are ones who are taking these little ones, who are becoming the servant of them, and our church can learn so much. There's a different ending to the title for the sermon than what you thought it was. Everything we need to know as a church, we can learn from our preschool. In terms of the intentional welcome that is designed into the program, into the classrooms, the way the furniture is set up, the way the toys are selected, the way so that people who are interested in construction, which Everett very much was the other day, with his little saw and his little hammer, and people who are interested in learning how to cook can come over here and learn how to cook, and people who want to play with kinetic sand, which is like the most amazing stuff in all the world. If you haven't played with kinetic sand, you need to volunteer for the preschool just to play with the kinetic sand. They can do that, and they can hide things and find things, and then there are blocks and the patience of Amy to have every day the same kids build a ramp to slide a car or a ball down and to try to make it jump, and to have them experiment with that and be patient as they try to find a way that works is phenomenal. Everything that we really need to learn as a church in terms of creating welcome, meeting people where they are, finding ways for different people with different ideas to express them, we could really learn from our preschool. So I hope that this year you will get to know our preschool. You'll get to know our teachers. You'll get to know their classrooms. You'll get to know their kids. You will pray for them, and you will support them. And parents, I don't say this just because I'm the pastor of the church. I say this because I really believe it. This is an excellent school. And we are grateful that you've entrusted your children to our care. They're good people here. They take their job seriously. And they are professionals when it comes to learning at play. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.